A big debate facing the Fallout community right now is the presence of the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 76. A ton of you guys have been commenting on videos asking my opinions on this, so I figure in this video what I'll do is actually lay out some of the major arguments, why some people feel like it makes little to no sense for the Brotherhood to appear in the game, and why some people feel like it is very plausible. But even then, why some people are still unhappy. So if you haven't watched some of the gameplay, the Brotherhood of Steel is in Fallout 76. You can see things like their emblems on certain barricades. We saw that in some of the E3 footage. But even beyond that, after the big event at the Greenbrier, a lot of people found various notes or even uniforms that do fit the Brotherhood soldiers. As further gameplay has come out, it seems like the Brotherhood actually had a quite considerable presence in this game. In a YouTuber named Star Snipes gameplay, and I'll have this linked in the little eye if you want to check it out for yourself, you actually find several Brotherhood corpses that are lootable. And this is just in one location. Based on other reports, it seems like people are finding a lot of Brotherhood stuff all throughout Fallout 76. So the argument against this originated in it simply doesn't make sense. Based on the lore we have established right now, the Brotherhood of Steel couldn't have been in West Virginia in 2102. Most of the early days of the Brotherhood lore is actually from some of the early Fallout games that were created by Interplay. Although the Brotherhood of Steel was created in 2076 before the bombs dropped, this was actually on the west coast of the United States, specifically in California. To oversimplify things, basically the Brotherhood resided in Lost Hills. This was a military base right around the Mariposa military base, something that's been mentioned in many other games and one of the notable locations in Brotherhood lore. The lore here is pretty sparse, but a lot of people point to the fact that it does mention that around 2150 is when they started expanding from this location and actually going out into some of the regions surrounding it. So if they're predominantly located in this base from 2077 to 2150, or roughly around that time frame, how could they possibly be on the other side of the country in West Virginia in 2102? A lot of people are saying Bethesda trying to justify this is egregious and just totally unacceptable to the established lore. So I mean, going further to say it's a big insult to Black Isle or Interplay, the people that kind of wrote the Brotherhood lore and actually created the original Fallout games. That initial post created the initial uproar with a lot of those details included. 2 days later, somebody by the name of Tagazile, I'm definitely butchering that, sorry man, did create a new post refuting a lot of those claims. I'm going to summarize some of the stuff he says, but he gives a lot of detail and provides sources, so if you want to know more, I will have a link to his post down below. So the counter argument basically states that the lore between 2077 and 2161 for the Brotherhood of Steel is pretty sparse. There's not a lot going on there, and we don't know many details about what they actually did. The lore states how the Brotherhood settled down in 2077, but you don't actually hear anything else for another 75 years. There's just a 75-year window there. That's really the biggest point he makes, and it kind of counters a lot of the points other people were making, but for some of the subsequent ones, a lot of people are arguing that the Brotherhood are isolationist. As we see them in Fallout 76, what they're doing is helping some of the first responders, helping some of the locals of this region that was just devastated. Even if you do justify their trek across the country, it still wouldn't make sense as to what their actions are in West Virginia. This kind of argument here is actually a quote by Maxon saying, "You're the first outsider we've let join in a long time. Well, near on 20 years now." This seeming to indicate that the Brotherhood have in fact helped and incorporated other people, inviting them into their bunker to save them from the outside. He makes a couple of additional points addressing some of the other major arguments, but the first two definitely tackle some of the biggest ones I have been seeing personally. So I think as it stands right now with this post and with the initial post, it is plausible for the Brotherhood of Steel to appear in West Virginia in 2102. But then the question kind of arises, should they be there? Even though it is plausible and technically possible, is Bethesda just getting out of control with retconning, and should this just have been one of those ones they left alone? Obviously that in and of itself is super subjective, but I'll give you guys somewhat of my opinion on this. One thing that actually I wasn't super happy about with Fallout 76 is the lack of new and interesting factions. Of course, there are the Scorched and some new NPCs along the way, and hopefully as we play through the game, we'll learn more and more about their backstory. The first responders are seemingly a new faction, although we don't know a ton about them just yet. But in some of my earlier videos, once we found out this game takes place so much earlier than a lot of the other Fallout games, was a faction that we at least somewhat could see the rise and fall of. Perhaps something akin to the Brotherhood of Steel, where they gained a lot of power, maybe had valuable resources, but then maybe due to the elements, due to competing factions, or something along those lines kind of fell out, and that's why we don't hear about them in later Fallout games. So maybe that is in Fallout 76, but based off what we've seen right now, it seems like they really stuck to their guns. You do again have those first responders, but even beyond that, the Enclave and the Brotherhood of Steel are pretty prominent and seen throughout much of the game. The Enclave less so compared to the Brotherhood, but either way, what I would say about this is I kind of wish Bethesda just ditched the Brotherhood. I love the Enclave, so I'm happy we're hearing more about them, and we haven't really heard much since Fallout 3 anyway, but we know so much and have seen so much about the Brotherhood that I'm not super psyched about seeing more of them. I feel like I kind of got my fix. Now, whether or not Bethesda should have retconned them, I think that's a super hard question to answer, and I think it's pretty foolish that a lot of people are trying to answer it. We simply don't know how the Brotherhood are in West Virginia in 2102. I raise the question to you as a Fallout fan. Is there any way that could be justified in a pretty legitimate manner, in one that would satisfy you as a fan? Now, I know not all of us have the highest confidence in Bethesda's writing abilities, especially following Fallout 4, but I think it's incredibly difficult to form an opinion on lore and how Bethesda is retconning and justifying the Brotherhood in this region when you don't actually know what the justification or retcon is. At the very least, this applies to me. Obviously, you could feel whatever you want, but until I actually play through Fallout 76, read through a lot of these holotapes, notes, or listen to some of the stories, I don't think I could really decide one way or another as to whether or not this was a good choice or a bad one. Right now, I'm definitely leaning on more of the bad side. If I'm to speculate, I would guess the Brotherhood are in Fallout 76 because, one, they're a fan favorite, like literally the favorite faction among fans. And guess what? When you have a game that's going to be selling you cosmetic items, you probably want Brotherhood in that because people love them so much. We know very little about how microtransactions will actually work in Fallout 76. We know the metacurrency is known as atoms. You could buy things on the atomic shop or something along those lines, and Bethesda is solely selling cosmetics. It's not super hard to follow as to why the Brotherhood, Fallout fans' favorite faction, would be in this game. I bet people would be a lot less likely to buy outfits of a totally new faction they never heard of before. I could be totally offbeat with that. Again, we don't know much about what Fallout 76's microtransactions are going to be like, but it certainly seems like a likelihood, at least in my eyes. And then even beyond that, outside of just writing the lore, obviously from Fallout 4, they just have a lot of those Brotherhood assets. They're not going to have to recreate totally new things. I think that's one of the more minor ones, but I definitely think that could be a factor. So in conclusion, my opinions on the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 76 are, it's really hard to tell right now. We just don't know how they're being justified to be in this game. There's definitely a scenario where I'm totally okay with the justification. That may be less likely than me being upset, but again, we don't know. Although I do personally hold the belief that the Brotherhood are in this game largely for microtransaction and revenue purposes. And to be frank, I don't personally fault Bethesda for that. They are a business and they have to make money, and if this is one of the ways they plan to do so, then that's their prerogative. Once the beta launches and we uncover more and more about the Brotherhood, I think either way, people are going to freak out about them being in the game, but as to whether or not the average everyday user truly cares, I think is going to be heavily based on how Bethesda justifies this. We certainly know it's plausible, but that doesn't mean it's going to be good. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. A lot of people are asking me to make it. I really don't understand why. I've never been a huge lore for Fallout channel or just a lore in general channel. But either way, hopefully I laid things out pretty clearly, showing you the argument, the counter argument, and my actual opinions on that. Hopefully you guys from this can deduce your own opinion. We're not superhuman, so unfortunately you'll be influenced by how I stated things and how I presented them, but hopefully you can draw your own conclusions here. And again, I have links to everything down below that I used in case you just want to read the raw sources. But before we end things off, I do have today's psychology fun fact of the day. As I mentioned last time, I'm actually studying for a test. It's super helpful to talk about things or explain it to somebody else. That makes you just remember things better. And what I'm going to be talking about today is self-fulfilling prophecy. This is another one that you probably learned about in an intro level psych class or just know about anyway, but hopefully I'll go a little bit more in depth on it and you'll find out some things you might have not known. So self-fulfilling prophecy takes a number of different domains. You could have the one that's personal, like, oh, I think I'm going to do poorly on a test, so you don't study and then you do bad on the test. You fulfilled that prophecy of you doing poorly on the test through your own actions. And that really embodies what this is. It's you thinking something, you behaving a certain way, and then whatever you thought originally is the result, but as a result of your own behavior. This also is super pertinent in prejudice or just really interactions with others. Let's say you think somebody else is going to do something that could be good or bad, and then you treat them differently based on that expectation. In the end, if they do that thing as a result of you treating them differently, that is a self-fulfilling fulfilling prophecy. This has actually been researched quite extensively, and one other thing that kind of stems off of this is known as the Pygmalion effect. This was a study where basically they took a bunch of elementary school kids and gave them an IQ test. It was a disguised IQ test, meaning people didn't actually know it was an IQ test, although the teacher was made aware of it. In addition, experimenters told the teacher that roughly 20% of your class is expected to be intellectual bloomers, as they're dubbed, and should perform pretty well academically. The teachers were given the names of those students, and then a while later there was a second IQ test administered, and what they found was everyone's IQ increased because these are kids, and as you age up, your IQ just naturally increases, but those students marked as intellectual bloomers had even further increases. It's believed that as a result of the teacher's expectations of actually maybe holding those kids to higher standards or just treating them differently because the teacher expected them to be intellectual bloomers led to them actually performing better. And to be clear, all of these kids were exactly the same. They just randomly chose 20% of the class and dubbed them intellectual bloomers. Either way, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. As always, again, I thank you all for watching. I'm sure reading the comments on this one is going to be a lot of fun. But with that, I hope to see you guys all next time. Later.